Hello and welcome. This is Cashflow 2.0, the only podcast that walks you through the treacherous jungles of your financial statements and leads you on a path to not only overcoming some of the most costly mistakes that many new entrepreneurs make, but helps you make your money start working for you right now.
Sweet.
Join us today as Pam changes your financial future and makes finance fun.
Hi, and welcome back. And if this is your first Cashflow podcast of Season 2, welcome to it. We're going to talk about something today that will benefit you whether you are a first-timer here or have been with us before, as we've talked about different things relating to finances for entrepreneurs and how to make finance fun instead of the dreaded pillar of our businesses. You're in the right place to do that if you're an entrepreneur. Hang with me. And we're going to talk today about bookkeepers because one of the questions I get most of the time, well, two of them, but they're related to the same thing. One is my bookkeeper the right one for me? And the second and sort of corollary to that is, how do I find the right bookkeeper? We're going to dive into that a little bit today so that by the end of this podcast here, you are going to know exactly how to find that bookkeeper that's going to serve you perfectly. Other episodes I have out here talk about why sometimes our bookkeepers don't serve us well, and it's usually not the bookkeeper's fault. I'll hang that out there, and you can go look for our episode that talks about why your bookkeeping reports make no sense to you. And it's often not the bookkeeper's fault. So I'll leave that out there as a little carrot. You can go find that episode because it's very, very useful. So first of all, the first question that I get, first type of entrepreneur that asks this question, is one who actually has a bookkeeper in place already. And this will happen in small businesses and large. It honestly doesn't matter what size your business is. I've gotten this question from all of them. And it is my bookkeeper good for me? So I'm going to ask you a series of 4 questions to help you decide the answer to that. I know it can get a lot more complicated than this because many times our bookkeeper is a friend or a friend of a friend or a relative or somebody who's been with us a long time in another capacity in our business and is also taking care of the books. So we're going to talk through some of those complications here after I go through these first 4 sort of questions for you. But I want to talk first about these triggers or these things that should indicate to you that you might need a change. And then we'll address how to deal with some of those more emotional aspects of making that change. So first of all, what I would ask you is the product your bookkeeper is giving you, in whatever form it's in, whether you're getting something monthly or daily or weekly, or they're able to ask or answer you questions when you ask them about your business. Ask yourself this very simple question. Is the information I'm getting from my bookkeeper useful to me? Okay, and there are a couple ways to define useful, but the way that I would define it for this purpose is, can you ask a question or get your monthly report or get your weekly report, look at it, and it's useful just as it is? Or do you have to ask a whole bunch of follow-on questions or restate some of the same things that you've already stated in previous months or weeks? Or do you have to take it and put it in a spreadsheet and then work with it and do something with it? If any of those things are true, then I would say the answer to this first question is, the first question of, is my bookkeeper, what they're providing, useful to me? If you're having to do any of those things, ask further questions, repeat yourself over and over again, or take it and put it into another format to have it make sense to you, then the answer to question number 1 is no. Your bookkeeper, currently as they are, is not useful to you. And remember, we're separating this from emotion for the moment, so forget about the who it is behind your bookkeeper right now, and let's just accept that your bookkeeper is not useful, unless they are. Okay, if you're getting reports each month or each week or however frequently you want them, and they make sense to you, the way you run your business, and it looks like what's happening in your business, your gut tells you what's happening in your business. If you're not having to repeat yourself at all, if whoever it is taking the information you give them the first time and not repeating their questions, and if they're able to answer your questions without a lot of follow-up, then they are useful. Okay? So useful, yes or no? First question. The second question is your relationship with this bookkeeper a peaceful one? And by peaceful, I don't mean are your conversations civil, because usually we all maintain a professional decorum and have civil conversations with our bookkeeper. But when you hang up the phone or walk away from the desk or see a report, do you quietly to yourself go something like, I want to kill my bookkeeper, or I can't believe I have to go through this again, or I'm never going to get what I need here? Do any of those things happen quietly inside your head? You don't have to answer this out loud in case your bookkeeper's in the car with you. But in your head, give yourself an honest answer of yes or no about whether your relationship with your bookkeeper is peaceful. And by peaceful, I mean when you're not with that person and dealing with their product and what they give you as a bookkeeper, are you calm, peaceful, and appreciative of what they're doing or not? Again, no judgment here, just yes or no. So is what you get useful, and are your feelings about this relationship peaceful? The third thing to ask is what you're getting timely? In other words, are you getting, and here I actually mean timely in two senses. One is it consistent? Are you consistently getting what you need at a particular time during the month or week or however often you want it? And is it on time? Okay, so if you're expecting to see your financial reports sometime before the 5th workday of the new month, are you getting them before the 5th workday of the new month? And are you getting them regularly on the 5th workday before the new month? So, number one, useful. Number two, is it peaceful feeling about this relationship? And number three, are you getting things from them on a timely basis? And the fourth is, are they reliable? Okay, so is the information that they're telling you consistent from call to call? Is their reporting timely? Is it also accurate? Do they make a lot of mistakes and have to correct them in future months? Or are you getting something that pretty much stays the same and you don't have it kind of moving all over the place every time you see a different report? Okay, 4 things. Is my bookkeeper good for me? Are the reports you get useful? Is your relationship a peaceful one? Do you get things in a timely fashion? And are they reliable? Okay. Now, if you have checked no in more than one of those questions, okay, this is probably not a great bookkeeper for you. It's not saying they're a bad bookkeeper at all. It's saying they're probably not the right bookkeeper for you. And again, if it's only one of the 4 items, you can maybe work with that. I would challenge you not to ignore it, because as a business owner, not only do you deserve to have really good financial support, no matter how big you are, but you need it. You frankly need it in order to make really good decisions in your business. So let's just say that you are one of those folks that was not able to check all 4 of those boxes with a yes, or even 3 of them with a yes. And you have a little bit of aggravation when you deal with your bookkeeping. It's kind of inconsistent when it gets to you, and when you look at it, you're like, I don't really know what this means. If that's the case, you probably don't have the right bookkeeper. Now, you also may be in a situation where the bookkeeper is a friend or family member or somebody who's involved with the business, and you find it emotionally charged to break it to them that they're probably not the right bookkeeper. And this happens, quite honestly, way more often than we think, because bookkeepers do come to us in a number of these ways. It appears to be at the beginning of a business one of those tasks where it's like, it's just a little bit of bookkeeping, a little bit of record keeping. Anybody can do it. And so is very, very good and organized at the filing and at managing my email and at managing my travel schedule. So they'll be able to slap these transactions in wherever they need to be. And the reality of that is that's not true. And I will tell you that if you're in that situation where a family member or friend or longtime partner or coworker is doing this work, and you have not checked all of those 4 boxes that we just discussed, then they are probably not very happy about having to do the work either. Because trust me, if your relationship's not peaceful with them, they know it. If their reports aren't useful, unless you can tell them, they may not know it, so they can't do anything about it. But they get a sense of it. They do really feel and understand what you're projecting when you're dealing with your finances, that lovely tension that comes into your voice every time you're talking about it. If they're not timely or reliable, then they probably have too much on their plate, or they're not comfortable doing this work, and therefore they put it off and avoid it, just like you might, because it's not your strength, your zone of genius. So what I suggest to you here is you think about it that way. If it is time to make a change with your bookkeeper, my bet is there's a 95% chance that that bookkeeper that's a friend or family member is probably not thrilled to be doing those books. You may have other work from them for them in your business. You may not. But if everybody's living in stress with this particular issue, like anything else, undoing that stress by taking this off their plate will actually make things better for both of you. So I just throw that out there for your consideration if you haven't been able to check all the boxes and that bookkeeper is a friend or family member. Now, if that bookkeeper is not a friend or family member, and if none of these things are checked, if all of these things are not checked with a yes, if the information's not useful, if your relationship's not peaceful, if the reports aren't timely, and if the person isn't reliable, I would say even if you've marked one of those boxes with a no, it's time to go back to that bookkeeper and either cut them loose right off the bat or talk to them about it and give them a chance to fix the issue. So that's kind of the first part of this discussion is the current bookkeeper good for me? Now we move on to the second part of the conversation, and that is if either my bookkeeper is not good for me, or I've never had a bookkeeper, or I've been doing it myself, how do I find the right one for me? How do I find a bookkeeper that's good for me? And that is such a common question. So I want to give you a series of questions that you can ask, and also explain to you the different types of bookkeeping firms and bookkeepers that exist. This is all available also in my book, Your First CFO, and it's chapter 6, I believe. So if you need a little more detail on this, feel free to pick this up. There's a link in the notes here, the podcast notes, on exactly how you can go about getting one of these books for a very, very discounted price. So I leave that to you, but we're going to cover it pretty much here as well. There are essentially 3 types of bookkeepers, and I'm going to cover this part quickly because it's sort of the meat and potatoes of it, but the real important thing is how do you know what to ask them to make sure they're going to be the right bookkeeper for you so that you do have a peaceful, useful, timely, and reliable relationship with your new bookkeeper. What kind of bookkeepers are there? Essentially 3. Okay, there are these big, huge national companies which are really, really good. The pros, they have a lot of bench strength. In other words, so there's not just one bookkeeper taking care of your books. There's a bookkeeper and there's a backup, so that if you need something, you can always pick up the phone during regular working hours and somebody will be able to handle your problem. That's kind of one of the big pros. The big cons are that they're relatively expensive because they're really in place for much larger companies for the most part, but they often do have a branch that will focus on entrepreneurs, but they will be a little bit pricier just because they do have a lot of overhead to cover in their expense structure. And I forget what I was saying. I think I was going to make a third point there. Oh, there's another con. The other con about these large national bookkeepers is that they're often not very flexible, right? So they have a certain set of rules about how your books need to be set up, and your books need to be set up that way, and they won't make any exceptions. Now, the good news about that for people is that your books are being set up exactly the right way so that as you need them for things like banking and investors and providing you reports, that you'll get them and they'll be technically correct. Your accountant will get them and be able to file your taxes and all of those things. But they won't give you much flexibility to do all those things and also provide you really meaningful reports that speak to you in your language. So that's the ups and the downs of these big national chains. Second, there are some regional companies or smaller, I'll call them smaller companies. Sometimes they are a business owner with 5 or 10 bookkeepers. Sometimes they're a regional company with 50 bookkeepers. But they are focused, they're located regionally. They're relatively small compared to these national firms. But they can also do virtual bookkeeping for clients. That's another question we should address, is whether a bookkeeper needs to be on site or virtual. That's a whole other thing that we will get into, but on another episode. So these more a little bit smaller firms are a little less pricey, a little more flexible to your individual needs, although they still often have a relatively rigid structure because they are setting up a lot of clients and they need to make sure they have a process for doing that very efficiently to keep their overhead low. And they're still probably a little pricey, but not awfully pricey. So they're kind of a happy medium bookkeeper, right? But like I said, this could be a shop with 5 or 6 bookkeepers, or this could be a shop with 30 or 40 bookkeepers. And depending on what size that shop is, those variables of pros and cons will vary along the spectrum a little bit. And the last kind of bookkeeper is, we call them the hang-a-shingle bookkeeper, sort of like the hang-a-shingle doctor or lawyer. And it's a one-person shop, and they serve all their clients personally. And huge pros here are they tend to get to know their clients very, very well. They generally are better priced because I won't say better priced. They're a little less costly because they don't have as big a chunk of overhead. But the downsides of these small sort of hang-a-shingle bookkeepers is there are accreditations that some of the software providers give for bookkeepers, like you can get a QuickBooks certified bookkeeper, or a Xero certified bookkeeper, or a Profit First certified bookkeeper. But those certifications are by the vendors who sell their software. Now, there are bookkeepers who have gone to a couple of years of school and have truly gotten some kind of a degree in bookkeeping. And that's a great thing to ask about in your question process, because they generally can understand the concepts of bookkeeping regardless of what product they're in. So that's a pretty important distinction. But the truth is, anybody can hang up a shingle and say, I'm a bookkeeper, including somebody who's never taken a bookkeeping course and who truly has never worked with a product before. They can just hang up their shingle, say, I'm a bookkeeper. So you really need to screen for that kind of stuff in your process. So pros are, they get to know you pretty well. It's very personalized. It's probably a little bit less expensive. The cons are, it's very difficult to really know that they've been validated as a legitimate bookkeeper. But if you find one, then it's awesome. So how do you go about finding one? For a lot of us who are entrepreneurs just starting our businesses, we really need one of these hang-a-shingle bookkeepers. And I would say, the first and best way to find one of these is by referral. To find your bookkeeper is by referral. Talk to your friends, talk to your peers, talk to people at the events that you go to, and ask them, who does your books? Do you like them? Are you getting the information you need? Do you mind referring me? Okay, so that's thing number one. We're going to go through 7 here. So the first of the things is definitely find somebody via referral. If you can, don't go blindly to the internet looking for them. The second thing is, if for whatever reason you don't have a referral, and this is actually equally as effective, ask them for references. And make sure they are references from companies that are like yours, the same size, the same level of needs. So referral or reference is question number 1 that you need to ask. What's question number 2 that you need to ask? Really important to know what their capacity to serve you is. And especially as you get down to some of these smaller bookkeepers, ask them, how many clients do you have? And how many clients can you take and still serve them to the best of your ability to make sure that they get what they need from you when they need it? Very important question to ask. And then pay attention to the answer and how quickly they answer it. And ask maybe a couple of follow-up questions just to sort of validate the instinctive answer that they give you, which is usually going to be, oh yeah, I have capacity. Well, what does that mean? How many hours will you be spending on my work? How will I be able to reach you? When can I reach you during the day? How quickly will you respond to my questions? So dive in on that one a little bit. So number 1, referral. Number 2, what's their capacity to serve you? Number 3, ask them what their typical client is like, looks like, what their business is like, before you tell them about your business size. So there are a couple things that drive what a client is like. One is revenue size, and then one is volume of transactions, and the last one is the complexity of the transactions. So is it a simple business? I sell a product, I get paid for it. Or is it a complicated business? Like I sell a product and there are 4 or 5 different payment methods for it, and somebody can pay on over time, or they can pay me all at once. So find out from them, say, tell me what your typical client is in size and complexity, and then also in volume of transactions. Do they process 1,000 transactions a month? In other words, are they making thousands of sales a month, or are they making 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 sales a month? So big ticket items versus small ticket items. Ask that question before you tell them your business size and complexity. You want to get a feel for whether they're dealing with clients like you, so they know and understand your business model. So referral or reference, capacity, and then number 3 is what is their typical client like. Number 4 is pretty obvious, is what's their price. And this is going to vary, okay? And I will tell you that clients, or almost clients, prospective clients of mine, this has ranged anywhere from $25 an hour to, $6,000 a month for bookkeeping. So there is a massive range in there. And as I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, the really large dollars are mostly going to be those national and regional accountants, and the smaller dollars will probably be the hang-a-shingle folks. But on the other hand, you want to ensure that what you're paying them is indicative of how good they are, frankly. And if they're at a really, really low rate, they're down on the very low side of what I'm quoting here, they may not have the experience to know that they can be more competitive than that, or they may not be more competitive than that in the marketplace. So think about price. And that is one of those things in the book I do talk about in a little more detail. But you do want to just talk to friends. What are they paying? How are their businesses like yours? What are they paying for bookkeeping? Talk to bookkeepers and ask them what their prices are, and then compare them as you talk to multiple bookkeepers. But don't just accept price because it sounds good. If somebody says, hey, I'm $20 an hour, it might not necessarily be the best person in the world for you. Okay? That's number 4. Let's move on to number 5. Okay, number 5 starts to get into the product that they give you. So number 5 is, what reports are you delivering to me? Exactly what am I going to see? Don't give them the answer, just ask them what you're going to see. And they should say these 3, at least these 3. Profit and loss statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement. If they only say profit and loss and balance sheet, and they never mention cash flow, then they aren't really aware of what makes bookkeeping reports useful to you as the entrepreneur. They definitely should mention all 3. Now, what would be really cool, okay, and where you really know you've hit a gold mine, is if they say to you, I give you your profit and loss statement, and we'll discuss all these in other episodes, don't worry, but profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, and your cash flow, but I'll give them to you showing month by month by month how you're doing. Okay, what this bookkeeper has done is something hugely critical. They've all of a sudden taken a number, which really means nothing, kind of just sitting there as a number on a report, and they've put it in context for you. And just the fact that they brought that up in this conversation tells me that they want to make your life easier. They want to only give you things that make sense to you. So that's a gold mine. If you have a bookkeeper who starts to talk about making things meaningful to you, a great hint there is if they say, I'll show you your month over month reporting. So you'll be able to see January next to February, next to March, next to April, and see how you're doing. Okay? So that's a really cool thing if they add that. But at the very least, 3 reports: profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. Okay, just quick recap here, and this will all be in the infographic that we've got attached here with notes in the show notes. But number 1, is it a referral or reference? Number 2, do they have the capacity to serve you? Number 3, what's their typical client size? Number 4, what are they going to charge you? Number 5, what reports are they going to give you? And number 6, equally as important as what reports you're going to get, is when are you going to get them? So here's where I buck the trend of almost all bookkeepers, and they want to come after me in a lynch mob. But you should not wait any longer than the 5th workday of the following month to see your financial reports for the previous month. Okay, let me say that again. You should not have to wait any longer than the 5th day of the month to see your financial reports from your bookkeeper for the prior month. Okay? If you're waiting longer than that, then either they aren't paying enough attention to your close process to make it efficient, which means you're probably paying a lot of extra money for hours that aren't needed, or number 2, they really are stretched beyond their capacity. So on that first call, on that interview call, get from them a commitment on when you'll see your reports every month, and then hold their feet to that fire. Don't let it slip. Don't let it slip. And there will be reasons, there will be excuses, there will be all the things, but don't let it slip. And I would suggest that you make sure that that day is the 5th day or before. There are a ton of bookkeepers out there, I'll tell you this right off the bat, who will say, that's impossible. I'll have it to you by the 15th day of the following month. Now, it's up to you. If you're a smaller business, you probably don't have as much that you need to know to react to from those reports each month. So, okay, you can choose to wait for that 15th day, but I promise you there are bookkeepers out there who can deliver you high-quality reports within 5 workdays. It's all about how you close the books, and if they can do that and meet that commitment, then they know all of the hacks and the tricks, and they've had the 10,000 hours of experience to know how to close the books efficiently. So your bill will be lower, and you'll get information earlier in the month, okay? That's a big one. And finally, number 7, did they ask you in this interview process how you think about your business? This is a huge sign, because it means, again, just like that telling you that they deliver stuff showing month over month over month, this tells me they're interested in what you need, not how they are going to develop and deliver it to you for their own sake and their own efficiencies, but how you think about your business and what you need. So what I would do is say, do you have any questions for me? And then pay attention to those questions and see if they are bookkeeper-centric or you-centric. Is that bookkeeper focusing on how to best serve you with those questions, or are they asking questions that best serve them? And I'll give you an example. A bookkeeper who's asking a question that serves you is going to say, yeah, can you tell me how you think about your business? Do you have multiple products that you sell and you think about them differently? Do you have particular terms you like to use when you're talking about your expenses or your income or your revenue? Have you worked with bookkeepers before, and what's worked well and what hasn't worked well? Okay, if they're asking those kind of questions, they care about you, and that's so important. But if they're asking questions like, only, how many bank accounts do you have? Are they automated yet? Do you keep your receipts? How quickly do you turn your receipts in? Are they legible? Do you have any other people in your organization that I need to get stuff from? When I ask questions, how quickly will I get the answers? Those are all really important things for the bookkeeper to know. And it's okay for them to ask a couple of them. But if they're not also asking from that first batch of questions, if they're not also asking about you and how to serve you, probably not the right bookkeeper for you. So those are my 7. Those are my 7 tips on how to find the right bookkeeper if you've determined that either you don't have one and need one, or that the one you have has probably gone a little bit past their time to serve you well. And the 7 questions, again, for hiring that bookkeeper are, I got a referral or reference about them, I know what their capacity is, I know what their price is, I know when I'm going to get my reports, I know what those reports are going to be, and I know that they're going to ask me questions, and they've asked questions to be able to serve me well. So if you've asked these 7 questions, those are the 7 things that you'll know. Talk to a few bookkeepers, at least 3, I would say, to get all that information and compare and contrast. And then the really cool thing is at the end of that, your gut is going to know if you've picked up the right one. And that's key to entrepreneurship, is making sure that what's happening out there and what you're doing in your finances aligns with your gut. You're going to get a good feel about one of them. You're going to have iffy feels about the others. So that's the scoop. Grab the infographic and have it nearby when you do call and start talking to bookkeepers to see who's the right one. And remember, if you're in that situation where you currently have a bookkeeper who's not serving you, if it's not useful information you're getting, if your relationship's not peaceful with them, if the data's not timely and they're not reliable, it's time to change that relationship. But remember, it's going to serve them as well, most likely. You have a great week. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this podcast if you found this useful. Pop out there, give me a ranking or a rating. And I'd love to hear from you if you have questions, comments, or would like to hear about any additional information related to cash in your business. This is Pam signing off.